Our next featured speaker today, P.Z. Myers, is a professor of biology at the University of Minnesota Morris and an aggressive advocate for evolution, atheism, equality, education, and lots of other words that begin with vowels. Did you write this, Vic? Someone wrote this for me. His new book is The Happy Atheist, and he expounds on his blog, Pharyngula, one of the most popular blogs on science, religion, and atheism in the world. And so we are super honored and excited to have with us today P.Z. Myers. Let's welcome him.
Well, hello everyone.
Hello.
Hello.
So, here I am in Texas.
Run.
Yeah. You guys have a reputation. And, what I thought I'd do today is I'm going to read you a bit from this new book that's coming out August 13th called The Happy Atheist. You're all supposed to buy it now. But what I thought the introduction was particularly appropriate because I bring you a message of hope. And that hope is that even far to your north, up there in Minnesota, the place is full of religious bug weasels. You are not alone. It's the same all over this country. You know, I travel all over the place and everyone talks about how they're at the buckle of the Bible Belt, and I've decided the Bible Belt is about as wide as the continent. It stretches from sea to sea, so it's everywhere. This whole Bible Belt nonsense just doesn't fit anymore. So anyway, this is the introduction of my book, and I'm writing it to let people know what they're in for, and also to tell you a little bit about myself. So here we go. On any fine morning in rural Minnesota, I can step outside the door of my home and look a few blocks to the southwest and see the Church of the Assumption of the Blessed Virgin Mary. Just out of sight behind nearby houses and a few blocks to the west lies the First Lutheran Church. About 4 blocks to the east is the Federated Church, the liberal church in town. Even closer is the Lutheran Campus Ministry, which serves the university at which I work, and the Newman Center, its Catholic counterpart. Since this is Minnesota, I've got a fairly fine-grained sectarian choice within Lutheranism that I could make. The First Lutheran Church belongs to the Evangelical Lutheran Church of America, but I could attend Faith Lutheran Church, which is another member of ELCA, or if I wanted something a bit more conservative, I could attend St. Paul's Evangelical Lutheran Church, which belongs to the Wisconsin Synod, or Bethel Evangelical Lutheran Church, or the Church of the Lutheran Confession. There's also Zion Lutheran Church nearby, which belongs to the Missouri Synod. I think you're already getting the idea. This is a crazy place, right? And of course, if I were really broad-minded, I also have a choice of the First Baptist Church, the Kingdom Hall of Jehovah's Witnesses, the Apostolic Christian Church, or the Morris Community Church, which meets in the local high school. I count 15 churches within walking distance of my house. There are no synagogues or mosques, probably because the believers they would pray upon are too thinly populated here to be profitable. I also can't forget that when I step outside, I am treated to hymns played at a stunning volume from the loudspeaker in Calvary Cemetery, just 2 blocks to my north. During the day, they're played at least every hour. When the old fellow who donated to the cemetery is feeling particularly pugnacious, they'll be programmed to play every quarter hour. This is my hell. I just open the window and it's like hymns nonstop. The coffee shop in downtown is owned by a coalition of churches, which normally makes no difference to me. The coffee is secular at least. But I've learned not to visit on Tuesday mornings when the men's Bible study group meets there. It's simply too stressful to try and hold my tongue when they discuss the historicity of Noah's Ark or the imminence of the rapture and the end times while I sip my coffee. I've succeeded in keeping to myself so far, but wouldn't want to risk an eruption. There have been a few moments, like the time they were discussing the proper role of Christian women, that is, subservient and obedient and quiet, when I was tempted to give a few secular baptisms and negative secular coffee. population of roughly 5,000 people. And we have 15 churches. The only bookstore in town is also the video rental store, the kids' card game store, and the local cell phone retailer. We're drowning in piety with a host of preachers, each one with a different version of the eternal and irrefutable truth, each one taking advantage of the tax-exempt privilege of religion to build their little temples to their peculiar dogma. There is nothing unusual about my town. This is perfectly ordinary, rural, Midwestern America, like thousands of other small towns all across the country. We're just immersed in religion like every other God-soaked spot in lightly populated, Republican-leaning, real-life, genuine USA. Now, I would even say that these are good people like most human beings, who are mostly concerned with getting along, doing well for their families, and seeing their community thrive as a safe and stable place. I do not accept the common atheist line that religion is a phenomenon that makes men do evil acts, like fly airplanes into buildings or start holy wars. It can, and it has, of course, but those are the pathological extremes. And it isn't right to judge an idea by the excesses of those maniacs who turn a belief into a cause for violence. Mainly what religion does is make people believe in ludicrously silly things, substitute dogma for reason and thought, and all too often draw people down into self-destructive obsession as they fret more and more over their reward in the next life than their accomplishments in this one. There's also a mix of fervor in my town. Certainly there are zealots who are convinced that every fornicator is going to burn in hell for eternity, but I suspect that fornicators outnumber the fervent. For every true believer, there may well be a dozen who go to church because they've always gone to church. Because they're in charge of bringing the coffee cake to the social afterwards, because they've had it done into their heads that good people express their worth publicly with regular attendance, because they've been told it provides good moral guidance for their children, or because their mother-in-law make family get-togethers a living hell if they were using a hint that their faith had lapsed. And of course, even among those sincere believers, there are hints of desperation with which I can sympathize. The old man obsessively poring over the pages of his Bible, his finger moving word by word, quietly mumbling over Revelation. He is afraid. His mortality is hanging over him, and he wants to make sure he's right with the Lord. He's sure he's going to face it too soon. And there's the woman racked with guilt over her wild teenage years, her abortion, her flirtations with drugs and sex, and now her kids have reached that same age, and she can't bear the thought that they might carry out the same experiments she did. And she hopes a little hellfire and Christian discipline will keep them in line. You know it won't. And so many have secular concerns. Will the economy improve? Will America triumph? Will their children prosper? They've been told so often that the fate of the nation lies in courting the goodwill of God, that they seek answers to real-world problems in the reassuring fantasies and apocalyptic terrors of faith. So I'm an atheist swimming in a sea of superstition, surrounded by well-meaning good people with whom I share a culture and similar concerns, and there's only one thing I can do. I have to laugh. Living in America at the turn of the 21st century is like attending the circus when the clowns are performing. It's low comedy full of pratfalls and pies in the face and silly costumes, but it's also hilarious. Come on, you Texans, you have fun with Perry. Come on, you got to admit it. Everyone's it just comes bubbling out when there he is. Okay, the people around me seriously believe most fervently in a God who briefly became human and was tortured to death for his trouble, and that this is the greatest story ever told. The omnipotent Lord of the cosmos is a man-like entity who, in addition to keeping the planets in their courses, deciding the fates of nations and spawning hurricanes and earthquakes, frets endlessly about the sex lives of his chosen people, insisting that the males chop off a bit of membrane at the tip of their penises, while the females must preserve a scrap of membrane in their vaginal canals as long as possible. Lately, he's become a devotee of football, and players and spectators beg for his divine favor in helping to get a ball from one side of the field to the other. His followers are offended at the thought that they have distant relatives who are monkeys, but they feel ennobled by the myth that they were made from dirt by an invisible, hairy anthropoid ape in the sky. He's a soap opera god who instills in his people a misproportioned sense of propriety that isn't fitting for the high-minded, imagined philosophy of their prophet Jesus, let alone a 2-year-old child. The faithful are fond of claiming that he is a god of peace and love, but most often he seems to be a god of nosy busybodies, of prying prudes, of outraged promoters, of arbitrary pettiness. Jehovah is the god of sanctimonious killjoys. How else to explain people who think the greatest threat to their happiness right now is the existence of people of the same sex who fall in love with each other? And at the same time, we have priests raping children, and their defenders are most irate at the people who ratted out the pedophiles and dog collars. Now, I try to laugh, but at the same time, I feel the suffering of the human cost of these follies. But then, as Shakespeare knew, the best comedy has always been born out of the truth of pain, and has a leavening of tragedy mixed in with it. And I confess, sometimes the scampering of the clowns gets wearing, the humor is too crude, too over the top, and sometimes you want something a little more subtle and sophisticated. And when that happens, I can always reliably turn to the po-faced commentators, apologists, and the bleachers who watch the absurdity of religious belief performed with them, and instead of laughing, offer excuses and interpretation. Religion is a serious business, they say, while watching the sick line up for miracle cures at Lourdes, or the transubstantiationists arguing that wafers of bread really do turn into the substance of God in the mouths of their flock. Or rabble-rousing politicians reassuring their followers that they don't come from no monkey. And yes, God created the earth at a date we have since determined occurred 9,000 years after smarter, more practical human beings domesticated the dog. This is another kind of humor, the spectacle of seeing smart, well-educated people suspend critical thought in order to invent elaborate rationalizations for indefensible absurdity. It's weird enough to watch people pantomime trying to escape an invisible box, but it adds a whole new level of meta-weirdness to see other people straining to argue that the box is actually there. So I laugh, and I admit the laughing often seems mean-spirited. Look at the people wasting their lives praying, of all things, or racked with guilt because their harmless desires were regarded as sinful by Iron-Age goat herders. Aren't they stupid? But they aren't, and I know they aren't. I don't regard myself as smarter than the townsfolk around me. What I see are ordinary people afflicted with folly, who could be happier and more productive if they were free. People aren't religious because they're stupid. Religion is a parasite of the mind that makes them do stupid things and think stupid thoughts, and worst of all, believe that freeing themselves of superstition would make them less human and less able to cope with reality, when the exact opposite is true. I laugh because they do goofy, foolish things in the name of their God, but also because I hope that a little raucous hilarity will wake a few up from their surreal lives and see how wonderful they and the world really are, if they only lived in the real one. So that's what my book is about, the folly of faith, the absurdity of apologetics, and I hope a little taste of the joys of reality is seen through the focusing lenses of humor, as well as the more traditional ones of science and reason. And now you gotta buy the rest of the book to find out what